and welcome to the coffee table. Today, the topic that we will be discussing is so painful that I don't even know how to start talking about it. I'm joined by Barrister Hassan Niazi, who's also a human rights activist, and the host of my show is in Karachi, and he'll be joining us via Skype, Faisal Sherjan. Welcome to both of you. We will be talking about the horrific case of Uzma, the 15-year-old girl who was tortured and killed by a family that she was working for in Allama Iqbal town a few weeks ago. This incident has outraged Pakistan. It has brought to the attention the very painful reality of what happens to millions, hundreds of thousands, millions of people in our region, in our country. There are countless children who work inside the house and who work outside the house, under the definition of child labor. This incident has opened a Pandora's box of what happens in normal, ordinary houses. You know, the kind of people that you interact with, the kind of people that you see around you, the kind of people whose pictures you see on Facebook and Instagram, and they are normal, regular, happy people, and what they do to people who work in their houses. I don't really know what to say. It's just one of those things that have horrified me as a woman, as a mother, as a human being, as a Pakistani, as a Muslim. It's just horrific on a number of levels. So before I say anything else and talk about other cases, similar cases of child torture on children who are working in people's houses, I would like to ask Hassan what he knows about the case, about this particular case, and what he thinks about it.
Basically, as we saw, the video went viral recently of how Uzma looked when she was tortured and how she looked before the torture. And indeed, it is one of the most tragic things. And in fact, it is reality as well, because as you said, this is what is happening in every household. If not every household, in every khandan,
every fourth or fifth household in Pakistan.
At least, I'm 100% sure. I mean, we know even in our families, extended families, we do see these little girls, little boys working in the house. And it is very unfortunate, because we think by paying them or by sending them to a school at daytime, we compensate. In fact, it is against international laws. It is against our own law. Any children under the age of 15 cannot simply work in the house. Regarding this incident, it was, I think, 18th or 19th when the body was found in a gutter, actually. And it's sad that how the family was extremely poor. I went to the house, and while even sitting in the house, the wall of the house actually fell. It was such a weak, small house. And I mean, they didn't even have proper place to sleep. They didn't have an entrance of the house. And naturally, if someone living in these conditions, I mean, I can't argue with them why they sent the little girl to the house. But there is absolutely no explanation to what happened with the girl. The girl was tortured for nearly 2 to 3 weeks till she reached this condition where they had to feed her because she couldn't eat herself. And then, obviously, one day while she was working in the house, I mean, she couldn't work. She was in that condition, but they were making her work. And while she was working, she, I think, accidentally put her hand in one of the, the people who had employed her in their food or something. I think their intention might not be of killing her, because she was in such a weak condition. They, I think, banged something in her head, and because of internal bleeding in her head, she passed away. And instead of taking her to the hospital, The tragic thing was, in fact, the more painful thing was, while she was slightly breathing, they tried to use the way you do this.
Iron?
No. They
Electric?
tried. They were actually electrocuting the girl, but I don't know what their intention was. I think they were trying to make her breathe again. And then once they realized the girl has passed away, they simply put her in a bag and dumped her in the local gutter. It's absolutely inhumane at every level.
Faisal, I'm just going to ask you, what do you think? What do you have to say about this?
What could one possibly think about it? Like you said, it's tragic on more than just one level. The fact that it is not lawful to employ children below the age of 15 in any manner does not seem to have sunk in with the people in Pakistan. We all know people who employ children below the age of 10 also. We see them all over the place. You go out to a public space, you see little girls taking care of little children, right? And we see that they're not even being treated as normal human beings would be treated. The very fact that a family can actually torture a child to the stage where she is barely able to even hold her head up, where, like Hassan said, she couldn't even feed herself, she couldn't even eat, right? It just goes beyond inhumanity. What kind of people would do such a thing? But we know that this happens all the time. We had the incident in, Baraku last year, where a little girl was similarly tortured. Luckily, she survived. But in that case, it was actually a judge and his wife who were doing it. Now, he has to have known the law, right? There is no way that he can actually say he didn't know what her rights were. So the rights of the child, we do know that there are laws that are supposed to protect the rights of the child, right? And children are the most vulnerable, most marginal, most vulnerable people in our society. And when you're at the bottom of the pyramid, you have double jeopardy. Just like Hassan mentioned, that the home he went to, where she came, where her father lived, right? There wasn't even a proper space to sleep in. There are probably more than 5 or 6 people in that little space. This little girl, right? She had been sent out to work, right? From what I've heard, the father was only interested in collecting the monthly salary, wasn't interested in the welfare of his own child, never went and checked what was happening with her. And that seems to be the norm, right? Hassan, please correct me if I'm wrong on that there are child protection laws, yes, but the child protection agencies are really not doing what they're supposed to.
But Faisal, before I go back to Hassan, the thing is, why are we even talking about laws when we're talking about children? The thing is, what about humanity? No, the law cannot. The law cannot enter a house. Okay, for instance, if you're hiring a child to work in a workshop or in a roadside hotel or in a in a place where it's visible, I can understand that there would be laws applicable and somebody would be able to see. If you're talking about a house and you're talking about a phenomenon that is so common that every second house, every fourth house, especially, feudal families, feudal backgrounds, middle class families, not high income, but the upper class, but most of them hire children who are, I call them children, even if you're 15, 14, because most of them are underfed and they look even younger than their age. What I am concerned about is, yes, laws should be very strict. There should be no if and but about this. If you find out about a house, I am saying this through this program to everybody watching us, by hearing what we are saying here. If you know of a child who's working in somebody's house, an underage child, somebody who's under the age of 15, please report it to the police, because you cannot just say, okay, kya farak padta hai? It doesn't matter, we are not doing this. What I'm trying to say is, if laws come later, what about humanity? How can a woman who has 2 children herself and torture a child to the extent that the child dies, and then those 2 girls, how old are her daughters?
The
woman who did this.
They're not daughters actually. They're friends.
They're not daughters.
And there was another guy. Basically, apparently, there are some drama actresses or celebrities at a local level. I mean, yes.
So we're not, Faisal, we're not even talking about, you know, how normally people say that educated people, education makes a difference, how enlightened you are, how exposed you are to the changing world, changing dynamics of the world. I don't think anything factors in. People are simply cruel to people they can be cruel to. Yes, I'm putting it very simplistically, but how do people who do not hit their own child would hit a child? All of us, I mean, Hassan doesn't have children. I'm a mother, you're a father. I cannot even imagine, I can't think of my son in pain. And similarly, just not because I'm his mother, but I can't imagine any other child being exposed to any kind of cruelty. Even if you have no other point of reference, you look at your own life.
The aspect of human is obviously something that we find devoid here. Otherwise, why would you be doing such a thing? That is why you have laws where people overstep the bounds of humanity, where they do not have empathy, where they do not feel for the other person, and where they do not feel for a child.
Absolutely.
The child is the most vulnerable part of our society. That is why you have laws, and that is why it is necessary for each one of us to be aware of what the laws are, you know, where the lines are to be drawn. Plus, we have culpability. We see all this happening around us, and we don't do anything about it. I can give you my own example, right? I reported a house which is just opposite where I live, and they had two underage children working with them, below 10 years old, and they were treating them really badly. But the child protection agency that came, right, didn't really do anything. Those children are still there. The only thing that's changed is they're not being abused anymore. That's the only thing that's changed.
I mean,
are there these agencies?
No, certainly, it's Child Protection Bureau who's answerable actually, and they should keep an eye on every household. To be honest, that is what they're meant to be, and their helpline should be more effective. But what I was thinking is, we need proper reforms because remember, these kids we are talking about come from the underprivileged segment of the society, and it's the rich people who end up employing these kids and, you know, use them in their houses. So I wouldn't mind a strong, serious reforms made. But when it comes to this kind of equation, when on the receiving end it's the underprivileged segment, and on the other hand the people giving the tough time are the ones who are in the kind of the power comes in that power circle. This is where the reforms becomes very difficult. And we do need reforms. For instance, if he is reported, you know, there should be a law that should reward him for reporting such an action. And while he is reported, there should be a third party monitoring, like Child Protection Bureau in this case, should be responsible for following up to this complaint. And secondly, for me, child labor is just like modern day slavery.
Absolutely, I agree.
Slavery is, I think, one of the biggest and the most universal offense. It's one of the most oldest offense, and it is that is a universal problem. It should have straight away prison till the person gets something from the relief from the court. The reason I'm saying is people do not take it seriously. Even till now, I can bet on anything. There are people thinking, we are not like these girls, we wouldn't torture her. We give her McDonald's instead. So what I'm trying to say is, even if you give them McDonald's, even if you send them to private school, that still does not permit you
to keep an underage.
And secondly, in this case, there has been torture. There has been a murder. That is a totally different thing. That cannot happen with any human being in the world. So what I expected now was, what I was hoping from the government, which hasn't happened till now, is one, simply they should compensate the family, because I think the state has majorly failed at every level, even when it comes to the child labor anyway. But what I was thinking was that if a speedy trial takes place and these 3 or 2 ladies who are involved or named in the FIR, if they are punished and given the punishment which comes under the offense, I think it will send a very good message.
It will, yes, I agree that, of course, as I believe, it should be your humanity that should stop you from doing these things. But unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be working, because unless Pakistan changes drastically and there are no poor people who need to send their children to work outside the house, this will keep happening. Children will be working, children will be earning money. But like what Faisal did, I think it's really commendable. This is where we can start from, all of us. Before we look at the government, what we can do is how we can change things around us. In my house, my teenage son put his foot down. Not that we had small children working for us, but there was a 14, 15-year-old girl who looked much younger than her age. And he said that he's just not going to let her work in the house. And he was 16 years old. So the child put his foot down that he's not going to let another child work for him or anybody else in the house. So if a child can say that, and Faisal noticed that there were these two children being abused. So government, society, family, all of us, I think everybody has to unite to change this. Right, Faisal?
But should I tell you
Absolutely.
something interesting?
I think, Hassan,
I'll
what you mentioned about prosecution, right, and quick trial and prosecution.
Yeah.
But you'd also mentioned that she was in a weakened state, right? So they hit her, and that led to internal bleeding. And then they were callous enough not to take her to the doctor. They tried to revive her themselves, and when they realized that that's not possible, they just dumped the body. Now the question is a defense lawyer, is a smart defense lawyer going to get them off with saying it wasn't really meant to kill her? It is culpable homicide or whatever one calls it. So how do you prosecute, and where, what kind of prosecution should take place? If you ask me, it should go straight to the anti-terrorism court, right? Here is an individual who's been held in a manner that no human being should be held. Right, and she's been tortured, she's been badly treated, leading to her death.
I mean, the anti-terrorist court you mentioned, the reason I would say the case should go there, I'm not saying the case should go, I'm saying the only two benefits are when the offense of what we call 780A, Section 7 of Anti-Terrorist Court Act is applied, what it does is, it takes the complainant becomes the state instead of the family or whoever filed the application for the FIR. And the second thing is the speedy justice. I personally feel if the state protects and looks after the family, I mean, they will not compromise on the blood money, considering the state must look after their welfare and take an extra step, since now they've lost the daughter, and this matters of a public interest as well. Secondly, when it comes to speedy justice, unfortunately, even the normal criminal courts, the district courts, even they are meant to do its justice with within 30 days. The law says try to complete the criminal case within 30 days. But unfortunately in Pakistan it takes 30 years. And ATC becomes the only option, and that is why the people demand for the ATA Act, and rightly so. Mr. Faisal asking or making this statement with regards to the terrorist act.
Okay, so
I'm
sorry as to interrupt you here. We'll take a short break and we'll come back to talk about this case and also a few other cases that came to prominence last year and even before that. We'll be right back. So before the break, we were talking about speedy punishment and speedy trials, but let's just, for the sake of conversation, if a case can't go to a case, what happens? Well, how do we change things? Is law the only way we are going to teach people not to harm children, not to be cruel to children, not to torture children? Because before you answer, I just want to mention these cases, the 10-year-old Taiba, I think that was in Rawalpindi. That was the case of a judge, of a woman and a husband who was a judge. Yeah. Then there was 15-year-old Muhammad Imran, who was tortured and strangled to death by his employers in Karachi in 2018. There was, then there was, who else? There were, there are many other children. There are many cases. I was just looking. I don't want to take their name. I don't want to take their names. But the thing is, what I want to understand is that you're a lawyer. Yes, you're giving us the technicalities. You're telling us what should happen vis-a-vis the law. But what if there is no way you can go to? You can look at the law.
That is a problem in Pakistan, especially the people, the illiterate class. Naturally, they are less, they don't understand the law properly. Most of them won't even know there is a law of 15-year-old. That is a problem, and awareness is where the only solution to it.
No, but it's not about the people who tortured these children of illiterate people weren't illiterate. These are...
No. That is a sadist mindset. You can't do anything except to... I'll be very... because in Pakistan, for murder, it's capital punishment. You hang in Pakistan. So the hanging is the only alternative left. Because obviously, when it goes to this extent that you're torturing and then causing death, and the only way is punishment. And the reason for punishment is to keep and make an example out of it. Secondly, one of the things that we need to be aware of is the prosecution, which was earlier mentioned by Mr. Faisal. It is very difficult to prosecute in Pakistan. We have the most incompetent investigation officers of the world, I guess, who themselves are not well literate, properly educated
and trained,
which becomes a hurdle. And then obviously, it's the corrupt segment of the society which causes hurdle in the case as well. The moment the limelight shifts, the next step will be bribing the family, which they call blood money. But I do not consider anything where you do not make a confession, you don't have guilt, only then blood money can come in. If there's no guilt, there's no confession, then the blood money is more of a bribery. And naturally, the society suffers in the end. So there is only way is the punishment and the law. There is no alternative to the law, to be honest.
And Faisal, what do you have to say about this?
I think Hassan is absolutely right. Now, what you're trying to, Meher, is point out and saying there's got to be humanity in it also. The fact that these things are happening means that people do not have the realization of what they're actually doing. And the only thing that will stop that is the law and the application of the law and effective prosecution. Hassan is absolutely right. The IOs that we have, the investigative officers, they're not competent enough. They don't know enough in terms of, criminal investigation, how evidence is to be gathered, how evidence is to be presented. They leave loopholes. A good defense lawyer will walk through those loopholes. So it is a problem, right? It's only when society as a whole becomes aware and starts to look around them, because our neighbors may be doing something like this, and if we don't point it out, it's a problem. When I pointed out, I had a bigger problem. I did have a big problem because the Child Protection Agency not doing its job started to bother me, right? And I had to deal with it. But I did deal with it because the law is there that protects you. You need to be aware of it. We know that the state has not been able to deliver on the social contract. These children should not be working in other people's homes.
Absolutely.
They should be in school. The state should be taking care of them.
Absolutely, obviously, it's since we call it Madina ki Riyasat and a welfare state.
We're talking about the law and how far does that go. So I would like to talk to you about the case that you just kind of won. Congratulations, the Khadija case, Khadija Siddiqui case. I wish she was here today. You know what has happened in this case. how long it took you, the kind of efforts you had to put in, the mental torture Khadija, physical and the mental torture she has been through. Absolutely. So please tell us about the case. Tell us about, I mean, there's some silver lining here.
I mean, it's a confession regarding our system. It's actually not taken that long compared to how long it takes in Pakistan. And the reason is, it was taking long till obviously I decided to take the matter to the media and the social media. And it really helped. The moment I took it to the social media, the Chief Justice and the Chief Minister took the notice. And they gave an ultimatum to the lower court judge, the magistrate, saying that you have to sum this case up in 30 days. The reason they said was, it already nearly 16 to 17 months had passed since the incident, and the trial had not started. So once the trial did not start, obviously it was clearly visible that the judge got intimidated, the magistrate got intimidated by the opposing mafia. And
you have to say something about that too.
Yes.
What was the mafia?
Basically, when I say mafia, it is basically in Pakistan, the lawyers are very strong as a community. If there's an issue of a lawyer, to pursue it in the courts, it is impossible. I mean, there's not if or but to it. If any lawyer appears against any lawyer, that means he's betrayed
the
community. He's a traitor. So if, now imagine how a country or a community or any society would treat a traitor like. So they treat him accordingly. So what I thought was, for me, it was about right and wrong. So I decided, I knew Khadija's story, I had heard the other side. In fact, it was when the other side completely, when they were trying to negotiate with me, they admitted that this has happened. So I asked.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, they did. I have a recording in my phone. Yeah. So I mean, it became clear because I was slightly double-minded in the first 2 months of the case. So the case did sum up at the lower court level in 55 days. Even though the Chief Justice and the CM had taken notice, still they couldn't conclude it in 30 days. And I mean, 55 days was absolutely good performance by Khadija's team as whole, because I'm not the only one in the team. There were a lot of other young lawyers as well. So, and civil society as well, who used to come every day, because I remember it was Ramzan of May, and it was May and June and Ramzan. So imagine how exhausting it would get. I mean,
so social media, if you had not involved media and social media in this, maybe what happened couldn't have happened. Faisal?
Yeah, certainly.
Faisal, do you think, I mean, social activism, this is not activism. He, as a lawyer, he was fighting a case, and the case wasn't going anywhere until he got social media involved. So if there is no way you can get attention, media's attention towards a certain case, there's no way to have a good end, to get justice done?
I think it's the very structure of our justice system. The trial courts, right, are inundated, number one. Secondly, like Hassan said, the lawyers have unfortunately not, they don't follow, right, the letter of law, the spirit of the law more than anything else. And cases are technically, they're dragged for a long time waiting for either the victim to just, give it up out of fatigue, right? Shaming is done in Khadija's case, if I remember correctly, in the lower court, in the trial court, right? A lot of attempt was made to shame her. So she withdraws from the prosecution, which she didn't. She's a very, very brave girl. And she stuck to it, and she said, no, she's not going to back off, even though they were shaming her. The second thing is the appellate courts, right? So the High Court and the Supreme Court are appellate courts. And it's also, because the trial court eventually, under pressure from the Supreme Court, why should the Supreme Court Chief Justice have to take suo motu notice for a trial to take place, right? That is what is wrong with our law. That is what's wrong with our structures. It should not be as a consequence of social media pressure that the Chief Justice should step in and say, please speed up this trial. It should be happening as a consequence of the law. It doesn't happen. We know that, and we know when it went to the High Court, there was immense pressure applied by the bar. The bar, unfortunately, did not side with the victim.
We need
It sided with the perpetrator of crime.
We need legal reforms right away. At this moment, we'll take another break and we'll be back. Welcome back to the coffee table. Let's just go straight to you. Legal reforms. What would you do?
Not just legal, by the way. Police reforms is very important as well.
Start with police reforms.
Because you all know that recently
Absolutely.
the police was, fingers were raised on police. And in every criminal case, it starts from the investigation. If the FIR, any word wrongly put in FIR can completely destroy the case, even a murder case, a terrorist case actually. And this is what happens. What they do is when you go to the police station, they first ask, this doesn't look appropriate, add this, add that. And they make it sound like, they're being helpful. And what they do is they take things in their own hands. Because the moment they make you lie...
That's what they do when you talk about about a murder.
Any kind of case. The moment they make you, they make you exaggerate or lie, then an investigation officer starts controlling the things once the FIR is lodged. And that is another place where we need reforms. And the most important thing is the accountability of these people. Absolutely. The one who are sitting, who lay the basis of the any kind of criminal case. And further, moving on to the courts, we really need reforms. And the Chief Justice in the Khatija case actually, and he specifically emphasized that these fake witnesses, these planted witnesses, they need to be punished as well.
Perjury.
And the laws do exist to some extent. But what we need is further like sections and articles in our acts, which emphasize and make sure it happens. See, there's no accountability of some of the institutions in Pakistan, and that includes judiciary, especially. And I mean, it does open up because once you start the accountability, it will create a big problem as well. And this is where the mafia comes in. This is where the status quo comes in. And reforms break that status quo. Secondly, as I said, we do need to enhance our punishments at different areas, especially when it comes to children and especially when it comes to the underprivileged segment of the society. So what I want to suggest is police reforms before any other reforms. Even in the criminal cases, if you look at the book, you'll see everything is perfect. One of the basic things is finishing the trial. What we need is just add a little bit of
So the law is there.
I mean, to some extent, like for instance, like I'll give one example because it's a whole, you might need 2-3 shows on this. For instance, if I take an adjournment in the court, I mean, I should be allowed 1 or 2. At the third adjournment, if the lawyer is taking the adjournment, he should be fined. If the judge is taking an adjournment, immediately a High Court Chief Justice, who is like the one who's, or the session judge of the Lahore or any district, they are the one who supervise them, who are their bosses. So they come in action. There should be simply zero tolerance to an adjournment. So
this is the tariq pe tariq wala.
This is the biggest problem. And secondly, the judges should be held accountable now as well. And laws should be made that every judgment, when it a judgment can be wrong. That is fine. There can be misreading of law or non-reading of a fact. Misreading of a fact, and you don't read a fact, you miss something. That is fine. That can be amended in the appeal. But sometimes there is clearly criminal kind of negligence. I mean, intentional or recklessness. That is where laws should be made So I mean, there are multiple areas, but yes, we do need. I mean,
yeah.
one small problem in our system is there are 4,000 judges, less than that actually, who are listening to the cases of 200 million people, the population of Pakistan.
200,
crore.
all of us.
Yeah.
Faisal,
4,000 judges across Pakistan, yes.
Yeah,
Faisal, what reform would you suggest?
I've gone to trial courts. Hassan, if I'm not wrong, the law of evidence, right, is the first thing that needs to be looked at, because it's too dependent on eyewitness accounts.
Like for
right? And that is where a dated FIR becomes a problem, right? Because I can write that the man who was firing a gun or who's wielding a knife was wearing a yellow shirt, whereas he was wearing a blue shirt. And when it comes to the prosecution, cross-examination, that is where things start to fall apart. Right? Just taking the example of the Iqbal incident, right? The weapon with which most of them were fired at has not been submitted. The weapon has not been found, right? Even though it is a weapon being used by one of the CTD people.
Yeah, CTD.
So,
and if the reason is, if the weapon is recovered, it becomes one of the biggest material evidence and a corroborative evidence. Even in Khatija case, look at small thing. Khatija goes in the hospital, she's bleeding, they change her clothes, now there's these blood-stained clothes.
They didn't keep the clothes.
And imagine, you know what, I'll tell you something interesting. Now that the case has ended, I'll tell you something what in reality happened. Actually, I haven't mentioned this anyway. What they did was the investigation officer handed over the clothes to Khatija's mother. And obviously for it was traumatizing. Didn't say anything. The mother obviously wouldn't know. I mean, there is lack of awareness. And obviously she wouldn't want to keep such clothes anyway.
Absolutely.
She threw them away. Simple.
Or wash them.
Exactly. So now this is where
the trail of evidence.
Yeah.
Right? The trail of evidence becomes a critical factor.
Yeah.
Right? Those clothes should never have been handed over to Khadija's mother.
No.
Under any circumstance.
Yeah. I'll just complete this bit. This is very interesting actually. So the younger sister was also stabbed, so she was bleeding. They kept her clothes, handed over Khadija's clothes. Now, who on earth will ask the IO, why did you even hand over the clothes? Who are you to even let, I mean, even if the mother is asking, you can't give her. You have every authority to even keep the mother in jail till your investigation is complete. You have so much power, and yet you are handing over the clothes. And there are multiple things where he was negligent.
I know the helmet thing.
I can name 12 negligent acts of the IO, which were clearly it was all crystal clear. And yet, the case, even though conviction has happened, IO should have been held accountable.
She told me, I spoke to her, she told me about the DNA. The helmet thing.
Yeah, I was about to mention, there are multiple, that is what DNA is one bit. Why did it not take Khatija's DNA? And why was she never told that her DNA is missing?
And
it was DNA when we lawyers got in the files and realized there is something missing. And we kept asking him, and they kept saying they would blame the forensic would blame the prosecutor would put the blame back on the police. And we were constantly going around and around.
What happens in a case like this is, here's a young female who's stabbed in broad daylight, in front of people, in front of a sister. Forget about the physical trauma, just imagine the kind of mental and emotional, whatever she has been through. Now, if her case had not become public, if she had not found a team of lawyers like all you wonderful people, what would have happened? You know the kind of backlash she was constantly getting on media, by lawyers, even from TV anchors.
I'll tell you something. Even the lawyer before me, even he was convincing Khatija that this case will not end. Just compromise, take some little bit money, and yes, let's get.
No, that's the thing, that a crime should be looked at as a crime.
Yeah.
It shouldn't matter that it happened to you or to me or to Faisal or her, him.
Yeah.
You have to look. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yes, to understand the motive, people go into the background story of who the person is, how it happened, if they knew one another, why they knew one another. But that is irrelevant when you're trying to do justice. So her case has made so many things very obvious that one, if you're a female, it's better to just be assaulted to the point that person was trying to kill her.
I mean,
he wasn't trying to scare her. He was trying to kill her.
Kill her, obviously, and in a very vicious manner.
Faisal, again, I'm back to you. What did you think about this case when it was, when they were...
This case should be a seminal moment, right, for our society, for our trial courts, for the way we look at, how victims are treated, how investigations are done, how the bar, right, intimidates judges, right, to get a favorable judgment or favorable outcome, right? So all these factors are all wrapped up in this one case, right? And I have to commend Hassan, right, for having pursued
his team
with so much vigor. It would not have gotten anywhere if there wasn't somebody like Hassan pursuing it, right? And I can imagine the kind of pressure that must have come from within the lawyers community itself, because the father of the culprit, right, he wielded a lot of influence within the bar. I believe he had been the president of the bar at one time.
So
the most amazing thing whenever you go to the lower courts is the elections. They're in perpetual elections. There is always something going on. So I wonder, they pursue the law.
It's just congratulations to you again, and I hope justice is done to Uzma and all the people, all the young people like her. And yes, I would just like to end with the prayer that something like this never happens to anybody. This is all I can say, because it's we are sitting here, and I'm thinking about that family in that house that you just mentioned, that in front of you a wall collapsed, and then there they are, that because we think that poor people don't really care about their children the way we do, and they send their children outside the house, and then they don't even check on them. But I don't think that's the case. Just because their way of communicating with their children is different. It's just look at the helplessness that he's sent there to work, and her dead body was found in a drain. So let's hope, as a society, as human beings, that this doesn't happen around us. All of us are responsible. Thank you. Thank you, Faisal, and thank you so much, Hassan.
Thank you.
For being here, and look forward to talking to you again. Good night.